Hopefully you wrote down the saying that was up on your screen before. Okay, the first one was revenue. Revenue is what? Vanity. Okay, revenue is vanity. Profit is sanity. And cash flow is reality. Okay, and if you've ever been in a position whereby you thought you were making money and then all of a sudden a big expense comes along and you check your bank account and you go, where is all that money I thought that I had made? Then if you've ever had that problem before, it's because of cash flow. So we're going to talk a bit about cash flow, and this particular area, as we heard in the beginning presentation with Paul and Scott, this is not always mandatory from accountants, and many actually accountants will just talk about the P&L, profit and loss, and also the balance sheet, but many accountants don't actually, unless you specifically ask, I want to see my cash flow statement, and unless you go digging in that particular area, it's oftentimes completely missed, forgotten, and that means it's a critical bit of data that is basically invisible to you, and you're probably suffering the consequences of it. So we're going to do a deep dive now into cash flow statements, writing the highs and also the lows that are in business as well, and what we can do to make sure that we never run out of cash in our business at really critical times. So we've got two presenters this time. We have Brian and we also have Joe as well, and they're from PTP, and they're going to be talking all about cash flow statements. Let's put our hands together and welcome up Brian and Joe. Thank you.
Thanks for the introduction, Dar. That's awesome. We're really thrilled to be here today to share the stage with some fellow professionals, really to help impart our knowledge out to you guys so that you can run even more successful businesses. And that's what it's about. So what we're here to talk about today is actually the highs and lows that we suffer with the flow of cash through our business, with the aim to not only reduce those highs and lows, but possibly eliminate them altogether. Where we want to kick off the presentation to begin with is I want to share a little story, just to maybe get our heads into the right space for this. So you may actually recognise a little bit of yourself in this story. So let's begin. Let's meet Barry.
Thanks, Brian. So this is Barry. Barry's on his way into the office, as you can see. He's suited up on a Saturday morning to try and get on top of his books and to try and find some money to pay some bills. It seems like Barry's been spending a lot of time at the office recently on Saturday mornings, and for that matter, Sunday mornings, and potentially after hours during the week as well. And he's really conscious of the impact that's having on both the team in the business, but also his family at home. So Barry got into business originally for flexibility and freedom, which I think we can all identify with. But lately he seems like he's getting the opposite of that. He's still passionate about what he does, but he's just not sure he can keep up the level of energy that's required to grow his business and to make the most of it. So it seems like some weeks he's got heaps of money in the bank and everything's going really, really well. But then the next week, somehow he has no money in the bank, and that always seems to coincide with when his bills are there to pay. And that's just driving him insane. He can't get to the bottom of it. All his reporting we spoke about, his profit and loss is saying that he's profitable, he's making money, he should be making money, but somehow at the end of the month he doesn't have any money in the bank. Again, he doesn't know why. So he's sitting at his desk and he's got three major things that he's concerned about right at the moment. One is the ATO. He's concerned because he's lodged his BAS recently, his bookkeeper's given him his bill and he wasn't expecting it to be as big as what it was. So he's going to have to talk to the ATO and he's a bit scared about that. Secondly, he owes some money for superannuation. Again, snuck up on him, and he's really concerned about that because he loves his team. He knows they all work for him, and they do a great job, and he wants to pay them what they're owed. But at the moment he can't. And he's also concerned because he knows that if he gets caught not paying his super on time, he's going to be in a fair bit of trouble. And thirdly, and probably the most concerning thing for Barry, is that his wife Jane doesn't know about any of this. So Jane's sitting at home thinking everything's okay. In fact, Jane's booked a holiday 3 months' time because Barry's been working his butt off to try and keep things going, and she thinks he needs a rest. Little does she know that that's actually made it more stressful for Barry. as he feels like he can't spend more time out of the business right at the moment. They've been to a barbecue recently with some friends, and one of their friends has had a business go under in the last 12 months. And he's been talking about that, and whilst it's unfortunate, it sounded like a terrible thing to have to go through. And Barry is determined to make sure that he doesn't go through the same thing with his business. So sitting here right now, Barry decides, I've had enough. I've had enough of this position I'm in. I can't carry it anymore. I need some help. So he does what we all do now in the modern era. He brings up Google and he types in cash flow help.
So, show of hands, does anybody recognise some of those issues within their own businesses at certain times? Those around them? It's quite a common thing. So we have lots of Barrys come to us at various stages of their journey, and there's nothing more satisfying than being able to provide them with some knowledge and some tools and some guidance to allow them to actually get back to enjoying their business, hopefully even loving their business. That's what we're aiming at doing. But one of the biggest frustrations we continually see in business all the time is what the outcomes of a lack of cash flow actually deliver to our business. So let's have a look at some of those. That's not them.
That's us.
By the way. That's us.
So we're all familiar with this hamster wheel, and this is what it can feel like. We're stuck on this hamster wheel. You can see this guy's got things either side of him. He can't get out of there. And he's surrounded by these stresses, these three stresses, and these are the things we see all the time with our clients. And they are financial stress, physical stress, and emotional stress. And we'll go into them briefly now. They've got a lot of headings under them, but they're the three key ones. So Brian, financial stress, what does that look like?
Yeah, financial stress, pretty straightforward. That one, it just feels like we don't have money in the bank. I haven't got enough money to pay my bills. I've got suppliers that are calling me. There's customers that are not paying me at the same time. And God forbid, I've got wages due next week and I don't know where the money's going to come from. The list just goes on and on.
Physical stress, how does that manifest?
Well, quite often with that one, when we tend to have a lack of cash flow in our business, we start to work more hours in the hope that the more hours we work, that'll turn around the cash flow within our business. So we start working those more hours. That starts robbing us from times at the rest of our lives. So quite often things like physical exercise, we now skip that because we're busy at work. The things that we're eating, we stop eating as healthy as we used to, or even on the right routines, because we're just smashing it in because we're working really hard. We just generally stop looking after ourselves as well as we can. And sleep deprivation comes into it at the same time. Lots of those things that really aren't good in the long term.
So we're worried about money. We feel terrible physically. And then emotionally, what does that look like?
Well, let's add some more stuff onto that. If we're working more hours, we're robbing time from somewhere, and generally that first place we go to is time with our family, time with our community. So it might be that you're starting to miss out on kids' sports on the weekends, maybe even school concerts, some of the things at night time. We're not spending enough time with our partners. The quality time disappears. I know quite often we talk to clients and say, when was the last time there was a date night or something? And it's like, there's no idea that there is a thing called a date night. So all those things start to disappear. The level of our communication with our spouse goes down as well. So it starts becoming pretty shallow. Like we saw in the Barry story there, Barry even decided not to talk to Jane about the financial concerns that were going on. As a result of that, he's lumped it on his shoulders, and it just gets heavier and heavier.
And we see that all the time with people, think it's their responsibility. They've got into it in the first place. They think it's their job to take it back out, and they need to carry that on their shoulders. And we hope that people know, and I think this community will be aware that we don't need to carry that on our shoulders. We can get help. So we start looking for help, and clients come to us, and quite often our number one tool we go to start with this is a humble thing that's quite often underutilised, and that's the cash flow forecast. So just to distinguish between a cash flow statement and a cash flow forecast, just to get technical for a second, when we're talking about a cash flow summary, we're talking about what's happened, something summarising what's happened in the past. When we're talking about a cash flow forecast, we're talking about looking forward into the future. So we're now planning and we're looking at what's actually happening and what we think is going to happen with our cash over that period of time.
Mm-hmm. And tell me, who gets excited about the idea of putting a cash flow forecast together? and I don't want to see that table over there. Not a real lot. So no one's really feeling the love that this kind of guy is, which is what that table over there quite often has once a year.
That looks
when
like
they're doing
Max, our
this.
business partner, actually. That guy there.
Conversely, who'd rather bang their head up against a brick wall and just bury it behind a computer, put up a sign and say, I need some help. I understand that completely. I've been there, done that myself, even as an accountant. And quite often that was because I wasn't actually using a cash flow forecast for the tool it was. I was just treating it as a tick and flick document that you just needed to fill in and then move on from there. So at PTP, we look at a cash flow forecast as a critical document that when we do it properly, it actually should be used as the first test in all our decision making and then a final measurement tool for the success. So what do I mean by that? If we've spent the time and put together our cash flow forecast that gets us from where we are now here today to where we want to be in 12 months' time, our objective financially, then if we're going to make a decision, which is a financial decision, it would make common sense to run it through that cash flow. So what does that mean? If we were to turn around and I want to buy a new machine, well, run the numbers on it. Is it still going to work out to get to the objective we want? If I want to change location, run the numbers. Are we going to still achieve the objective? Now, that doesn't mean if it wasn't in our original forecast, we can't go and do it. We certainly can. That's not what it's designed for. It's just designed as an accountability to say, well, if I'm going to go off course, am I still going to achieve the objective I want to achieve? Because that's what we set our hearts on at the start, said we wanted to get to this point. So we're really just trying to make sure that we can consider what we put in place and still get to there. Then is the final measurement tool. Well, that comes back to then we really put it against our profit and loss and our balance sheet. Did we actually get what we wanted? So the first test and the last test is what we're talking about there.
So just to clarify there, accountants got a bit of a bad rap. I think one of the guys touched on it before, that whole thing of we can be a bit of the bad guy and no, you can't buy that and you can't have that and you don't spend that money there. That's not what we're there to do. That's not what this is designed to do. So what Brian mentioned before about something changing, we all know business is dynamic. It does change, but it's really just there to say, well, look, does it make actual financial sense? Like just run the numbers, check before you go and do anything. So we've got the 5 steps up there. This is what we've labelled it, 5 steps to cash flow success. Really what it is trying to get to, coming back to the presentation, the highs and lows. We want to try and get off this roller coaster. That's what this is all about. So how do we stop ourselves doing this with our cash, and how do we maybe make it a little flatter across the year or across a period of time?
So before we get into the 5 steps, we'll just throw up on screen a bunch of numbers, which we all love to look at, I'm sure. So that's a cash flow forecast. Oh, gone a bit too far. To put it into what resonates for me that may hopefully resonate with you as well is probably looking at it in the format of if I'm in a suburb of Sydney and I've got my car out the front, don't know where I am, got to get across to the other side of town. I need to work out how I'm going to get to that space. So I don't know, yell out, what sort of things would you do when you've got to try and find somewhere, get into your car and get from one end to the other? Google Maps, there's the man. How did you know that? Can we get some prizes over to this man over here? Then you can go home, you're finished for the day. So it's all about, there's the objective. And as we can see up on screen, if Surrey Hills is where I want to get to, I can plug that in. That's the objective. So we're back over here in Parramatta, and we want to get to Surrey Hills. So that's that part where we plot into the objective. Something else I'll just highlight, Dale showed us a new tool today, so as accountants we don't get to see these things very often. So I thought I'd better use it as well. And everyone else I'm sure will be having a crack at this later too. But there's the importance of our objective. So once we put that in, we know where we want to get to. The next thing that pops up is we see the pathway in there. And the real, I suppose, part with that pathway is we can see some different variations. We can go different ways to get there. So it's no different than the objective we're looking for when we set our pathways for our financial objective. There's lots of different ways we can get there. So the alternatives are thrown up. And it's really important, and I know that I always follow when I do get in the car and drive there, I'll stick the phone up on the dash and follow it so that if I go off track, it'll soon tell me I'm off track and I need to deviate to come back because it knows my objective and it knows where I want to get to. So that's what I look at a cash flow as doing. We've got our objective there and then the pathway on the way through.
I don't know. Looking at that map, we don't live in Sydney, obviously, but it's surprisingly little traffic from what I've heard, based on that how long that's going to take. But the initial planning to reach the objective, as Brian said, that's preparing our cash flow. So our objective in that previous case was Surrey Hills. Surrey Hills, that's where we were going.
Yep.
So we know that's where we want to get to. Google Maps has told us the most efficient way to get there. It's given us a few other options just in case we want to, I don't know, miss tolls or do other sort of things that allows you to do, but it gives you the end objective as efficiently as you can. And then that's step one. That's preparing the cash flow, the first step. Second step, though, which is just as important, is implementing that and following it on the way through. So no good just putting it aside and leaving it there. Google Maps, I suppose, analogy, it'd be like putting it into Google Maps, looking at it and then chucking the phone over there. It doesn't do you any good. The implementation of the cash flow tells you if there's a car crash, traffic coming up. It gives you the ability to change your route and the way that you're going to go, and it gives you that data live, so you can change it as you're going, as opposed to when you get to destination 2 hours after you're supposed to do it, and you're stuck. You missed whatever you want to try and do.
And I like that, Joe, as you say, if you throw the phone to the side, that doesn't mean you're not going to reach your objective. It just maybe reduces your chances of getting there in the most optimum way. And that's all that implementation's all about. So where does the cash flow actually fit in? Well, if we go back to our first year with Dale and the crew, we created our mission and our vision for our business. We turned around and put our core values in place to support that, get some real purpose behind what we're doing. We created our 3 to 5 year goals, possibly 10-year goals, those BHAGs that we speak about. And then we start to break it down into smaller chunks. So we get to our 12-month goal, our 12-month objective. And then we're all used to now creating our 90-day action plans that we do at every conference, and they're put in place to achieve that goal. And then we might have monthly and weekly things. So they could be Zoom meetings, toolkit meetings, weekly huddles, daily huddles, whatever that looks like. So the cash flow forecast preparation itself, well, that fits in here. Once we've put our objective that we want to achieve, we then put the pathway in and create that forecast at this point in time. Then we put our 90-day action plans together that talk to that cash flow statement. They bring it alive at that point in time, and then our monthly, weekly things that we do have real clarity in the purpose of what they're designed to do. So now we know what the purpose of the cash flow is and we know where it fits in, we can move back to the 5 steps. Great.
Sorry, guys, just so you're aware too, we got no idea what the time is we're at in the presentation because we can't see it. So if we're taking too long, please tell us. Preparing the cash flow, number one, I think the next presentation is going to go into a bit more detail about how to actually do this and how to actually go through it. But we'll just use a bit of an example in our own business. We go away each July as a partnership group. There's 6 of us. And we take our budget away, which Brian actually prepares before we go. That budget template, which I think was touched on previously, is set for our business and our accounting business, and it's suitable for that. We use prior year income and expenses only as a starting point. So I think, again, I've seen this happen in the past. Someone grabbing a set of financials or the figures from last year, sticking it into this year, add 3%, that's my budget. That's a really ineffective way to budget. Might keep the bank happy, but it doesn't actually do anything for you. We complete it with the intention to use it. So we actually spend the time at this point in time to actually go through and know, okay, well, we're going to be referring to this all year, and we know it's our roadmap. So it needs to be accurate, because if it's not accurate, we're just going to have to go back and do this at some other stage. Most importantly, we don't stop there. We don't grab our cash flow we've spoken about when we're away for a week and stick it in a drawer. We're continually looking at it all the way through.
Exactly right. And that takes us to step 2, which is where we pressure test the cash flow. So what do we mean by pressure test? This is when we sit down and we start to throw the what-if scenarios at it. So as Joe said, we've got 6 business partners. We'll take all 6 of us in there and we essentially try and break our cash flow. What does that actually mean? So it's just throwing those what-ifs so that we can go through and work out, well, if this occurs, what's going to happen as a result of that? If this happens, what happens? So examples might be if we've got a major customer and we lose that customer, what's that actually going to do to our cash flow? What's the impact of that? because all these things are going to get in the way of us achieving our objective. No different than a vital staff member. That might, somebody might resign and fly out the door. What is that going to do to us? So we want to try and work our way through some of those solutions. It makes us a lot more nimble later on if we've actually given that some thought, but we might also move to the space of saying, well, okay, why would we be at risk of losing a customer? Let's make sure we're doing the things to reduce those sort of risks coming in place. Now, if you've got a team around you, said we've got 6 partners, so we really get to pressure test ours, but if you've got team, other members in there, you can bring them in at this part as well, because they know your business just as well as you do. You're looking for the blind spots that you don't see, and somebody else can come in and have a look at what may actually happen, and they pop that in there. Generally, and we know in our business, that most of the people within our team are quite happy to tell us where we're going off track, because they know the bosses are normally the ones that will do the things wrong first. So they're really good accountability partners for us.
Which is good. Sometimes.
So as a part of that, we're just really putting the actions in place that increase the odds in our favour of getting to where we want to be. So at that point in time, we've created a cash flow with our objectives. We've now pressure tested it to put it through the what-if scenarios. Takes us to step number 3. Oh, actually, I'll finish off with the nice-to-haves and have-to-have. When it comes to the expenses, we look at that and probably categorise it into 3 areas. You've got your expenses that are critical to you to earn the income that you're going to earn in your business. You've got the next ones that sort of fit into the grey areas, but then you've got what we call the really just nice-to-haves that are down the bottom. Now, if you've got a lack of cash flow that you're suffering within your business, those nice-to-haves, they really have to go, straight away eliminated. And it's really important that you do that audit and you do it every year, because they're very easy to creep back into your system. Back to number 3.
We have some interesting discussions about that as our partnership group as to what's nice to have and what's have to have. Because there's some very differing opinions, shall we say. Building our structure. So this is a long way of, it seems like a long way to get to here, but we're now starting to talk about a cash flow that actually makes sense. And we can see our peaks and troughs. So I think Mark before showed the actual P&L for a business in his presentation, and we could see the profit and loss varied wildly, went up and down. That happens in some businesses more than others. Tourism or hospitality businesses over Christmas, we have a huge month, and then it might back off a little bit over winter. Farms, same sort of thing. They get a lot of money at some period of time, and they spend a lot of money at other times. So we know what our rhythm is at this point in time because we've pressure tested it, and it's actually going to make sense. This is what we think is going to happen. Using bank accounts, just touch on this briefly. Our best practice, and we use this with all of our clients, is we have at least one other bank account. We won't go into the profits first thing, which I think you guys have been exposed to, but really we're using that bank account to put aside the money that's not ours. We're going to have to spend it later. So superannuation, GST, withholding tax, all those things that can sneak up on you at the end of a quarter. And are we going to need cash to fund the troughs? So do we need to go to a bank or a financier? Because we need to do that now. We need to know now. We don't want to do it when it happens. So if we're doing that, we're going to be under enormous stress. So we're just going to briefly run through this to visualise it, because this is what it can look like. And we're just going to compare here rollercoaster Barry with the initial story, and we're going to then show you smooth sailing Barry using some of the process that we're talking about. So we can see here Barry's going along. I'd love to use that spotlight thing, but I can't.
There you go, that top one there.
Great. So you can see Barry's going along. He starts the year and he knows he's going to make some money. His bank account's going to go up, which it does. He gets to this point and he looks at his bank and he thinks, well, I've been wanting to buy a new machine for a little while and I've got the money there, so I'm just going to buy it. And he does. And his bank account goes down, but he's okay with that because he knows that in time and fairly quickly his bank account's going to build back up again, which true to form it does. And he gets to a point where he gets home from work one night and Jane says to him, well, Barry, you've been working hard. We've been talking about doing some home renos. Why don't we take the money out now? Have you got money in the business? He said, yeah, I've got some money there, so I'll take it out and we'll fund that. So he does that, again, thinking it's going to build back up again. But right at that point in time is when Barry's bookkeeper walks in and says, here is your BAS bill and here is your superannuation bill for the quarter. I know we see a lot of businesses find themselves in this position. and he's now in a position where he's panicking and he's got to talk to the ATO, and we find him in the position we were in previously. Now what happens when we actually have a smooth sailing, Barry? A lot smoother. He comes in, we talk about it, he actually brings Jane in, and we're talking about what's going to happen across the 12 months. We pressure test his cash flow, and we set up a bank account. We move funds into that account every month, every week, fortnightly, whatever it is for him, and they're there for the end of the quarter to pay his bills. So his bank account drops down a little bit, but he knows he's got that sorted out. So he does that all the way through. He knows he was going to buy a new machine. He's done the analysis on it. It makes sense. He needs it in his business, but he's going to fund it. He's going to finance it as opposed to paying cash for this thing that's going to cost him, say, $100,000. So that's had very little impact on his cash flow. He then gets to his BAS being due, and the money's available. The BAS payment's there. And we know too that, and Jane and Barry have had the discussion about the renos and the things they want to achieve, and they know they can only do that once they've got the money out of the business and they can afford to do that. So they're not trying to make snap decisions based on what's in the bank. So you can see here the difference between the two. And when we're talking about a roller coaster, that's what that blue line is. We're going up and down, and this is why Barry's feeling like he has money sometimes and then no money other times. It's because he's making decisions based on what's in his bank account, not what's actually available. The other one, you can see there, is relatively smooth. Obviously, for illustration purposes, not perfectly smooth, but that's the idea of what it looks like. It's a lot flatter, and there's a lot less cash flow stress in his business. So we identify our early warning indicators. I'm not going to go into that. That's dashboards. That's what the guys are going to talk about later on, but it's basically making sure we know what's happening each week, so we're not waiting until the end of a month or end of a year. Drawings, personal use, stuff that we're taking out of the business. Try not to take lump sums out. We want to trade consistent small amounts and live to that. Because again, the amount of, and I'm sure the guys will agree with me here, the amount of times we talk to clients that take large lump sums out all the way through the year, the money they think they take out versus what they actually took out are vastly different. And I can tell you it's generally more than what they think. Key thing there is if you don't have the money each week to transfer, stop. And we're going to move into that now with the next steps. Measure, we need to fix that.
Yep. So that takes us for measuring for success. So this goes back to it being the cash flow forecast as the ultimate measurement tool. So we need to bring our cash flow forecast in against our actual figures that we prepare. So it's really important that we do have good internal accounting, as the guy said before, with our profit and loss and our bookkeeping, because this is what we're going to measure against. And we need to make sure we've got regular monthly meetings scheduled in where we sit down and gather the data. That data where we're comparing how we've actually gone against that forecast will give us things that might be going right, things that might be going wrong. It's important we're actually looking for both. So if things are working really well for us, how do we replicate that further in our business so we can be even more successful at it? For the things that are going wrong, we want to dive deeper into that and sort of investigate and find out, well, what is it that's actually happening? This is our final measurement part, because the early warning indicators that are put into the previous steps are there to try and catch things on the go. This is the last time because you're comparing it to your actual P&L. So if you don't do anything about it at this point, then you're really leaving things up to chance and you're just not taking control of it. Okay. So cool. At that point in time, we've got the cash flow, we've got our cash flow forecast with our objective set. We've then got the pressure test. We've put our what ifs. We've built some structure around it, and we've done some measurements and so forth with it. And out of those measurements, we've gathered data. And then it's really important that we take that data and come into step 5.
So that's where the rubber hits the road, review and act. So up until now, all we've got is information. And it's great to know that information, and it's great to be able to see it and to know where we're going right and where we're going wrong and what we can fix. But unless we start to take some of the actions that we need to take, and going back to that Google Maps analogy, unless we get off that route and stop going into the traffic, we're going to end up in a place we don't want to be. So it's the most common stumbling block because we're having to do potentially some difficult things. So we're having to talk to potentially a customer who's not paying us. We're having to talk to a team member who's underperforming and is not contributing the way that we want them to. So we've done the hard yards to this point, but it's important that we take the opportunities and that we actually take action. Because if we don't take action, we're just going to float along. So revisiting those steps, we've prepared our cash flow with the objective. As Brian said, we've pressure tested it. We've chucked everything at it to try and break it. We know exactly where we're at then. We build our structure to support that and make it as easy as possible. We don't want this to be hard because it can be hard. Measure for success. We structure that in so that we actually know how we're going against that, and then we take action when we need to.
And if we've got all those things in place, we're well and truly in the driver's seat of the bus. And if our team have been involved, then they're also empowered as well, and they're in alignment with what we're doing. So we go to work every day really knowing with real clarity what we have to do, what we have to achieve to get to that success we're after. Hopefully out of this, we've also taken out the highs and lows of that cash flow. So we've removed that stress as well. We've really given ourselves the optimum chance of having a business that we really love. And as a result of that, our own lives as well.
We're rewarded with dividends and all those sort of things. So that all sounds like cash flow utopia. It sounds like business utopia, and a lot more enjoyable than potentially it could be. So why on earth would people not do this?
Well, there's a host of reasons, Joe, and there's lots of them that are thrown at with our clients when we ask them about it. But we'll just quickly list those out there and fly through these. People just don't know where to start. How do I go there? What do I do with that one? I just pop them all up, Joe, I reckon. It's a complete waste of time. I'm too busy, got to do other stuff, so let's not go there. I've done it before. It didn't make a difference, so why would I go back and do that again? And one that really sticks out quite often is, look, if I do that, I'm not sure I actually want to see what those numbers are going to look like. I'm too scared, so it's easier for me to just stay busy in my business and just keep motoring on. There's a whole host of reasons of what stops us, but yeah, we really want to get past that.
So what do we see? I did the accountant thing here and went into a heap of detail on numbers. It's probably largely irrelevant. Really, what we see is the people that do this, our clients that do this and go through all 5 steps, do well. It's as simple as that. They make good money, they're in control of their business, and they're hooked on that. They form a habit and they just keep doing it. So that's what we see all the time. We encourage all of our clients to do that. We obviously can't make them all do it, but we encourage all of them to do it. And when they do it, there's some fantastic outcomes.
So what's next? Well, pretty simple. We've gone through our 5 steps that hopefully eliminate those highs and lows if you put these things into action into your own businesses. And we just implore you to go away and do that. And I suppose as a give back to the Business Blueprint community, we know people will struggle with this kind of thing. We also wanting to give away our cash flow audit checklist for people to be able to score against that. And Joe and I are also giving away an hour of our time to discuss those results with anyone that wants to take advantage of that, because we just want to see success within the community and people move forward. So whatever might be holding back, we'd love to see you push through that side of things. So that's it from us. We'll wrap up and move into the hot tips, I think, Dale.
All right, big round of applause. Thanks so much, guys. Come on up. So just, stand aside for one moment. And we're now going to hear some other additional insights, perspectives, and hot tips around this very important subject of the cash flow statement. Take it away.
Just an observation, don't be a Barry. Your staff superannuation and your GST you collect is not your money. So these guys are absolutely on the money. Be organised, budget for it, because the first little kitty every business owner goes to when they're not prepared with their cash flow is to fail to pay things like their staff super and the ATO. And today there's a bill going through Parliament, which I think it's been passed, I need to check, that it will basically make directors liable if they're not lodging BAS statements. And the ATO are now going to be able to estimate and collect GST and chase those directors. It's going to break down the corporate veil. So cash flow planning and understanding it, absolutely critical. These guys nailed it.
Awesome. Great.
I think it's pretty obvious that cash flow planning is a given. These guys talked about having one account for your GST and your tax and your super. I've spoken before about Profit First, which talks on 5 bank accounts. However it works for you, it's important to make sure that you do put that money away. We want to get those peaks and troughs out of our businesses and make sure we've always got the money there when we need it.
I think more and more as we go through the day, it's going to reinforce the most important client in your business is yourselves.
Good.
Yeah, and for me to add in terms of cash flow forecasting, I often get the question, how can I quickly and easily get a cash flow forecast? And what tool is out there that can just create it for me? But unfortunately, that's not the reality, and they often require work to get going and to maintain. and it really is unique to your business. So there are some cash flow tools that can help automate it and pull data from Xero and pull expected payment dates and payment receivable dates, but there's only so much it can do, and there is work to go into it. So it's something that you have to be mindful of and put time and energy into it. And it will pay dividends if you do that, because it is so important in business, and too many businesses, or the majority of businesses, fail because of cash flow and poor management.
All right, fantastic. So is there anything more that you guys want to say or add before we close? And obviously you've offered for people to come and chat to you here at the event, or possibly even you've got the audit process that you've got and can spend an hour with people unpacking that, which is very, very generous of you. But if someone's going back to their accountant saying, okay, I need this, what are they going to be asking for, and what should they get?
Yeah, well, it's and I did forget to mention that. Thanks for that, Dale. But Ivy's got a handout. It may have hit the tables yet in order to get that cash flow thing. But to go and talk to your accountant, it is something that you can't just hand to your accountant and expect them to put together for you and off you go. There's your little package of success. This is you. It's what you want within this cash flow. You have to be there to help build that, because what they're looking to do is actually unpack the knowledge that's in your head and put it into the number format, and then work with you to actually make that come together. That's the important part. So there's the plan, which is critical, but then without the actions, putting that together at the other stage, then all the planning, will just fall apart, and it will just become another dust collector. Like I'm pretty sure you've all probably got a business plan that's doing that somewhere in one of your drawers at home. You don't want it to go down that pathway.
Fantastic. All right, let's wrap this session up. Let's give these guys a big round of applause. Thank you so much. Fantastic.